Welcome to Negotiating Happiness, the show that helps you find happiness, success, and balance in your work and life. I'm Adriana Fiestro, your host for this journey into entrepreneurship and personal growth. We're broadcasting live on 107.7 and 105.3 FM in New Orleans as part of the United Public Radio Network. We explore the latest strategies, insights, and stories from successful entrepreneurs and experts. From managing stress to building a thriving business, we've got you covered. Good afternoon, everyone. We are broadcasting live. You are on Negotiating Happiness, and I am your host, Adriana Fiestro. We are here on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. If you want to sit back and relax and watch some of our shows on your big screen TV, we are also on Roku TV. Just type in UFO Paranormal. So today is July the 8th. I can't believe it. We are quickly running through the summer, it seems, and I'm here with the lovely Staci Millard from Thrive Accounting. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Adriana. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited for today because we get to talk about more business stuff. Surprise, surprise, right? So everybody grab your coffee, grab your lunch, whatever it is that you need to do. Come listen in. And just a quick reminder that we are live. So if you want to send in your questions, I am ready for you. And just give me a minute if you're on Instagram because I have to look on two different screens over here. But nonetheless, please send us your questions. I am here with Staci, like I said, and we're going to have a great conversation about how profitability means sustainability, because I feel like money is such an icky thing to talk about. So we're going to break through that. Money is not an icky thing to talk about. We want to talk about it. We want to learn about it. We want to use it for the right purposes, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest hurdles is that people think when there's profitability and we start talking money, that they lose the human aspect of their business. It means, oh, I can't want to pay my team above market wages anymore, or I can't want to do free things for customers or community. It's like they think they have to give up the heart of their business to be profitable, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's just so kind because you can be sustainable and be here for the long run, still doing great things for people.
Exactly. So before we jump into it, because I'm already excited about it, let's talk a little bit about who Staci is. So Staci is the CEO of Thrive Accounting, Canada's boutique accounting firm for small businesses. She's a mom of two, a multi-passionate entrepreneur, investor, board member, podcast host, and philanthropist. After working with thousands of entrepreneurs as well as her own seven-figure scale and exist, she believes in three non-negotiables for every successful business: making money, heart-led impact, and having a great life because of our businesses, not in spite of them. So that's a lot. You're doing a lot. I love it. I love the fact that we were able to get you on here to speak about everything. I feel like you have so much experience. So thank you again for coming on. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here. Like, how did you start out?
I was just a small town girl from the prairies, and my parents worked for government and big companies, and I always just had this view of what they did of like, man, they don't control anything. It was almost like they'd say like, oh, this, I could make this change, but it's not going to happen. And that lack of control really resonated with me. Also had a love for numbers, not necessarily numbers. People think accountants love the like 5 + 5, but that's not it. It's that I really love seeing the patterns and how things sort of went together to tell a story. And so I took a journey through accounting. It was quite safe. I was going to get my CPA. I worked for other people's firms. But through that, I finally got a hint of entrepreneurship, and I watched people have the control to make decisions for their business. And I could see the businesses that had those teams that were like, highly producing, but they loved coming to work every day, and they were having impact and doing all these things for their community. It was like, wow, that's amazing. And I also see business owners who had no idea how to do any of that, and they're, struggling and failing. But I watched people have the control over that. I think that's what really stood out to me. And I just fell more and more in love with business. Eventually, my own lack of control working for somebody else, and I'm like, we could be doing more here, led to me starting my own business, growing, scaling, exiting, restarting, and now I own multiple businesses. And I'm really passionate about helping people love theirs.
Which is really, really important because that passion will show through your work. And I think your clients see that and value that. And that's what also becomes part of the whole, how do I sustain my business? How do I make it successful long term, and all of that. How typically when I start talking to entrepreneurs, I find that there's always a story or always a moment in their life that pushes them to finally get there. And you talked a little bit about not having that control over how to do things. I find that there's always a little bit of pain or a little bit of something that just goes, you know what? That's it. I am doing it my way. So do you have that moment? Do you want to share that moment?
Yeah. Oh, I for sure have that moment. I worked for an accounting firm. I actually had a couple of these instances where I was managing basically an entire business for a couple of men. And I think they're very successful in their own way, but they did a lot of their networking on the golf course. And, I was back at the office, and I'm noticing that clients were wanting something from us and we weren't giving it to them. We weren't answering their phone calls. We weren't really integrated into like helping them see their businesses thrive. We're just showing up when we wanted to. I think a lot of people have those stories with like accountants who really only show up at year end, and that's not how I wanted to do it. But one moment stood out in particular where I'd been working kind of late every day, trying to do things well for this business. And this accountant that I was working for was on the golf course, and he came in last minute. He's like, "Oh, hey, we're staying late today to finish these." And the conversation was interrupted by a student who was partying with my manager or my boss's friend, son. And they were like talking about this pool that was like the size of my house. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I am killing myself for these people. And I want to do more for these customers. Like, I want them to feel the impact. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not benefiting for it. And I'm going to have a decision where I'm either going to want to check out, I'm just going to check the box every day, or I can go and have an impact. So I handed in my notice, and I was like, maybe someday I'll have that 4,000 square foot indoor pool, but either way, at least I'll love what I'm doing. Right.
That's such an interesting point that you made. You either check off the boxes and you're getting paid a salary, or you actually make a difference. And I find that that's the difference in a lot of people's working styles or the way that they think about things or how they come up with these ideas. Do you, like, at what point did you think, you know what, I'm not busy enough, I think I should take on a couple more businesses?
Yeah. Well, really, it was that I had exited my first business. So the funniest part about that entire decision was that I was working for somebody who was like 65, and I started my first business when I was maybe 25, 26, and I built in 8 years what it took him 40 years to build, and exited. And I was like, oh, like, I guess I do know what I'm doing. So, I don't think it has to be that I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go for the impact. I also made a lot of money doing it. So that's great. But the multiple businesses came when I had an exit, and I was like, okay, what am I going to start again? But through growing my first business, there's this concept of, you kind of start out almost as an employee. And I did. I started building my first business, and I traded my job for basically a freelance job. I was still working for clients. I was doing all the accounting. And eventually I started using other people's time. I hired employees, and I'm using their time to sort of amplify the amount of money and the impact we were having. And then the third piece behind that is getting to like sort of that Oprah stage or the Richard Branson stage, where your impact is like so much bigger than what you personally could ever do.
Yeah.
But in that sort of middle stage where I'm using other people to do that, I learned so much. So now I can get on to that third stage of business where I'm amplifying, and I'm not as involved in any of the businesses as what you think. I'm not that employee anymore where I'm doing accounting for somebody just doing it freelance. And I have employees, but I have, people to manage the employees. I'm not managing them as much day to day. So I can be busy the way you see it because I've built the systems. I learned so much through a decade of scaling and how to use people. And I think you actually have to go through that process. You can't just be like, today I'm going to start 4 businesses. You would have no idea how to manage any of that. But if that's somewhere you want to end up, you learn a lot in the process.
I'm really glad to hear you say that because I say it all the time. So I typically want people to
Yeah.
hear it from other experienced people that you have to do the work and you have to build the blocks in order to be able to step away to build all of those other wonderful things. So while you may not have your hand in absolutely everything in the day-to-day operations, you are still the brains behind it. You're still in your zone of genius and you're creating and amplifying more. And I love that word amplifying because I think it shows that it's not it's like a growth mindset, right? You're always amplifying what you already have. Um you're you're just using what you have. You're grateful for what you have, but you also want to get to more. So you're always thinking, what else can I learn? What else can I do? How can my people learn and do so that they are successful in what they do? It's really, really important that you instill that kind of a growth mindset from the beginning. And also the fact that you're saying, no, these systems have to stay in place or else the whole thing just crumbles, right? So it's true. You don't just wake up one day and decide I'm not busy enough, right? So
Yeah, and I would say like one of the things that leads to our success in doing that though is having a couple of key pillars. I'm not as set in how something gets done. So I believe that repetition has value, that creating habits in business like has value, standard operating procedures make things easy for people. But those are like the operating procedure is not a sacred cow. Like we're not, we can easily sacrifice it if there's a better way or a new software or a
yes.
new system that comes up. I'm not attached to those. What I am attached to is the values. So in my role now as CEO, I'm spending a lot of time looking at, what are the values. So one of them for me is customer communication. I really am so set on how do people feel supported by us, right? So how quickly are we responding? What language do we use? The way we talk to them, like all those types of things. So values. And I come back to looking at how is my team doing that? Right. So are the systems that we have in place supporting that? And that's where like my role is now, but it's about sticking to the values, but not necessarily how we get to the goal stays the same, but how we get to the goal might change.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's so important.
But that's part of sustainability, what you're describing to me, understanding that you have to change things, you have to audit things, analyze in order to get the best outcome or the most efficient outcome. And I do work with businesses sometimes that have a very hard time changing things. They'll say, why change it if it's not broken? I said, well, it is broken. You just can't see it because you've been doing it for the last 20 years the same way, right? So it's very important to understand that yes, while you have these standards and systems in place, you're not done. I always say, like, you go through the growth and the scale cycle multiple times in your business. It's not just build, grow, scale. So every time you do that, you should stop and say, okay, but do I need to build something to support that again? And that's when that comes in of, is there new tech? Is there a better way of supporting our clients? Are we doing unnecessary steps? Are we doing unnecessary work? That kind of thing. And you have to repeat that with your growth and scale cycles every single time, right? So
Yeah.
completely agree with that. What do you find is the most common thing when people talk about having these blockages? I'm sure you talk to a lot of people about their like financial blockages, and how do you fit that into what you foresee for them in terms of profitability? Like what are these blockages about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is just this fear of somebody witnessing maybe our flaws, right? I think that our human nature is to want to thrive, to want to fit in, to want to succeed. And a lot of the time when it comes to money, it can be, I don't know, people use the word embarrassing, like, oh my gosh, like, I haven't looked at it. Don't look at my mess, or I'm not where I want to be. And we don't want to point out those flaws. So there's this nature of just hiding from the problem, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's actually just a huge opportunity. Many of our clients that we work with, once they finally, take the dive of like, okay, I'm going to get it in order, the perspective is there. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, they know what to work on. They know the area of the business that's hurting. It's probably not the one that they thought it was. And there's just so much empowerment in it. And very quickly they can get results, but it's the fear and the hiding of like somebody else. When I have to let somebody know where I'm at,
Yeah.
usually we're watching people, hide their information from their spouse and their friends don't know, customers don't know, the team doesn't know. Really, nobody knows. Maybe they're not even filing taxes because they're not willing to admit where they're at. And it's really something to get through. And, once we've gotten over that, there's other layers to it, right? Of, like overspending and then making decisions of like, that's it, we're cutting everything. And those can be volatile and hurt a business because, you know, operating from extreme scarcity mindset, we're not investing in the right places that can have results, and we're not doing that. So we started addressing maybe some of those concerns, or the I have to do it all myself. The other one that's really common in scaling is business owners not understanding what value they provide a business when they start replacing themselves and some of the things that they do with employees. Like, especially we were talking about, like, you start out doing the thing for the customer. A lot of service-based businesses, or even in retail, you're like, you're wearing every hat. And as you start hiring people, you start feeling less and less like you're giving to the business. So there's like almost an identity shift of like, okay, what value do I even bring to this business anymore, that people have to overcome? And that's a very individual experience for each person and what they went through. But it's also hands down like the most empowering as you work through it.
Yeah, it depends on the mindset that you've got going on, right? So that's very interesting. So how do you, like, what kind of tips do you give people, or how do you help them get over these kinds of issues?
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part is really just that the number one is that they have to move through some of it themselves. Like, they have to choose to get help. I guess that's sort of true with a lot of things in our lives, right? Like, if we want to work out, if there's other things we want to stop doing or start doing, we have to be the one to make the choice. And I can't help them with that, but I can help them once we get started. We can be a very safe space. There's no judgment. We talk about that so many times of like, people come in their first call, they'll be like, oh, don't judge me. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Apologizing. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, none of that matters to us. We just worry about, okay, where do we go from here and how do we support you? So finding a service provider that is very supportive is you have to take the first step, but work with somebody who's supportive in that way, and everything else will be easy
Yeah.
and sort of trickle down after that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Then the couple other things that I would say is that, bookkeeping is the foundation of every decision. So those numbers that you get as a report that tell us, how did things go? Did we get to where we want to? Like, where are the problems? The bookkeeping is the foundation of all of those decisions. So having a quality bookkeeper, or if you're doing it yourself, having somebody give you a second set of eyes of like, what might you be doing wrong is really important, so that all of the decisions that you're making make sense. And then the frequency as well, right? Like, if you don't know, we could talk about like levers of profit and how businesses become profitable. But if you don't know what that is and you haven't set your direction, like, you have to be looking at your numbers more often so you can see, like, where are we going? Did we get there? Did we not? So looking at bookkeeping once a year, filing taxes, and you're like, oh, wow, like, I was really off. This wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. You need to be making that analysis. Like, you wouldn't post for a year straight on Instagram and never check your follower count or your reach, right? So
Right.
the same thing with making money. And especially because money pays the bills and your Instagram following doesn't. So which one should you be looking at? But yeah, that's, I think, the basis is your bookkeeping and then how often you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so hard because it's one of those things that nobody really wants to deal with, but it's so crucial to your business. I would say that like, you're looking at it every month, fine, but are you absorbing it? Are you understanding it are you? Because I'm finding myself in the category of I think I'm understanding it, but I'm not 100% sure, or I think I know what this means, and then I go and subscribe for 10 other things that month, right? And it's not sustainable that way, because obviously I'm not understanding the numbers how I'm supposed to be understanding them. So
But
how do you sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, I think the problem with that is that one, maybe we don't understand the numbers, but it's a skill set like anything else, right? So like if we're
Mhm.
marketing in our businesses, like, you know, we could be a massage therapist, but you have to learn how to market your business. You have to learn how to sell it. You have to learn how to understand the numbers. So first we have to come in with that like learning mindset and what are we going to learn? And then the second piece behind that is I think we're failing to tie in our numbers to our strategy. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people don't have the strategy. They're just like, well, I want to make more money. And so that's where you're like, that's pretty easy. You look at the bottom line. Did I make more money or did I not? And then your analysis is done because your strategy wasn't really set. So it's
Right.
going layers deeper of like, okay, so this month, like how many people do I want to impact? What does that mean for the strategy in the business? If you want to take on more customers, what does that look like? And when you start putting a more thorough strategy into place, you can start diving a little deeper. You're not just looking at net profit. You're looking at, you know, where did I invest my money? Did I get a return on that investment, or did it get us closer to the goal? Did it not? What other changes did I see? Why did I see those? And all of a sudden, when you start asking those better questions, now you're like, oh, these numbers hold so much more information
Yeah.
than like you look at profit and loss, or you look at an income statement and you're like, okay, great, that's how much money I made,
Right.
right? Like the strategy has to be there. So what what are the goals, and almost like asking yourself the 7 layer deep goals, right? Like why, what does that mean? What do I have to do to get there, so that you can have better information and
Yeah.
sort of more information, and you have more to look at than just profit.
Yeah. I also don't think that we're actually recording everything right in terms of great, you have a bookkeeper, your books are clean and whatnot. What about all the things that we do that we don't get paid for? Because at the end of the day, yeah, let's say you're making money and you're, yeah, this is going up, it's a steady increase, but you're then working like 10, 20 more hours than you were before, unpaid, because you are doing all of these things to work with your whatever your strategy is. I don't think we're understanding that our investment is much higher than what we're seeing on paper, right? Like your time
Yeah.
investment. So I come from a legal background where you would have to track your non-billables as well, right? So it's a
Mhm.
little bit easier for me to think in that way. But I think for people that have never been in that situation, don't even understand how to track their own billables, especially if they work on flat fees. Sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I just have a flat fee. I was like, okay, well, how long does it actually take you? And they'll say, oh, it takes about, okay, but how long did it take you, a year ago? Is it going to change in a year from now? Like forward, like there's no, like time is fluid for people, and they don't understand how much that can impact, because it's a huge indicator that your strategy is not right, or that you need to change something, right? Like how much time are you putting in your socials? I just had a conversation today with Jen from Honeyflow today, where we were just talking about how I've put in so much effort lately into the wrong things, and I've neglected like my website, like LinkedIn. I never use, and avenues that could probably bring me a lot closer to my target, who my target audience is. And these aren't things that I don't know. It's just you get so wrapped up into it, and you're like, okay, well, this is my bottom line. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I spent so much time doing all of these other things that my bottom line is probably actually a lot smaller than what I think if I were to get paid for that,
Yeah. Okay, this is such an important topic of like how time fits in. So one of the things that I really encourage business owners to do is a time audit. This just as much as like, oh, I don't want to talk to people about my money situation,
Yeah.
people really avoid getting honest about where they're
Yes.
spending their time. It's like being ripped open. It's like you're standing on stage naked and people hate it. But it's so, without looking at it, you can't make change. So one of the things though that I work with people on is if we show up and we mark down everything we do and what those would truly cost us. So when we're wearing all the hats, like what does the marketing cost us? What does a bookkeeping, what would it cost us if we hired somebody to do all this? Then look at like, what would I need to be paying myself as the owner and all these roles in this business? What would I need to be paying myself? And if we adjusted our profit and loss statement of like, ooh, I had to pay this all out, you get a very different perspective of how well the business is doing. And even in each one of those pieces, like you said, is like, oh, wow, like I invested X number of hours in marketing. I would have had to pay somebody in this to do this. And like, did I get a result on it? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, like I am cutting this out here. I'm going to cut all these things that don't really lead to my result out. And I'm going to double down on this other area that is doing well, or that I do think I could have impact. And so we're looking at, you know, like each one of those actions in terms of dollar value per hour and like, you know, what are they getting us a return? And then we're also looking at like, how does the business survive? A lot of business owners aren't at the point where they're paying themselves, or they're not paying themselves a market wage anyways. And if you learn that about your business, so you're not just taking the leftovers, you're not like, I'm working 75 hours a day and, you know, I pay myself $30,000 a year. When you start looking at like, how much effort did I put in? And like, this is $100,000 salary. You're like, ooh, I got to change that because this isn't sustainable. So how do we create other systems? We're forced to use software. We're forced to use AI. We're, you know, forced to use an assistant for all these things that like my hourly rate is way too high to be responding to these types of, you know, these smaller administrative requests. And you start making all the changes that just make your business actually sustainable.
Right. And that's kind of what people forget. Is that, oh, but if I do it, it won't cost me anything. And that's absolutely incorrect. If you do it at the hourly rate that you should be, you know, kind of focusing on future business or development, it's going to cost you a whole lot more than if you're paying somebody their hourly, you know, wage, or if you're paying for a subscription to do it for you while you're sleeping. Right?
Yeah. So one of the challenges though is like, if you're bootstrapping and you're scaling a business, when we start, like we pay for things in one of two ways, time or money. And usually money is a short resource, right? Like we have a set initial investment. And so oftentimes we're paying with time. What has to change for somebody is that they have to be more discerning about where they spend their time. That's where like, looking at, you know, how much did that cost me, even though I didn't actually pay for it, how much did it cost me, puts perspective on things of, do I want to be investing there? Because without looking at, you know, how did it go? Did it work? This time investment work out well? You're really just throwing caution to the wind. And like, that's not how we land on a successful business. It's test and track. Growing a business is all about failing over and over and over again until you get it right. So the quicker you can overcome failures, but if you're not looking at them, or like in air quotes, failures, right? Like if you're not looking at it, you're not going to change it. You have no reason to change what you're doing.
People don't like talking about their failures just as much as they don't like talking about their money, right? Which is funny because that's the main reason why you have these blockages, right? When it comes to money, is because you're not doing kind of, you know, in one of the episodes I used to call, you got to do a postmortem on your failed event. We've all been there. If there's some coach out there telling you that they haven't been there, they're either lying, or they're not really a coach with any value to add, because they haven't gone through the cycles of business, right? So failure is very much a part of it all. And I think until people get comfortable with that, or comfortable talking about money, they're never going to go anywhere. And I have these conversations with my clients all the time about pricing, right? It's like, how do you, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is too much, but nobody ever puts in right away, like when you first start, the perspective of, but what is this worth to somebody? You know, what is the value that I bring? And I think the moment you realize what the value is, that's when these pricing questions, you know, get a lot easier. And that's when you're able to kind of like move forward a little bit more towards that being profitable scale.
Yeah, what you just said, there's like two things that I think are really important. One, I look at investing in my business, whether it's my time or my money, in a way that's like I can always bounce back from my investment. So we're talking about failures and like being afraid to look at them. But I think it's important that we're making decisions like, people who count cards, like they don't put their entire pool of money in on a bet. They leave themselves a little bit so that they can come back from that. And like true entrepreneurs, that is honestly what we do is like we go like 90% in so we have, a plan B if things don't work out and we can
Yeah.
still come back from our failure. But the other thing is we're not talking enough, absolutely not talking enough in business right now about how we serve people. And I get so frustrated by this of like your business literally only exists to make somebody else's life better in some way.
Hmm.
That is
Hmm.
the only reason. If we can't give them a reason, we're not like, "Oh, hey, you make my life worse. I'm going to give you $50 for that hat." Like I hate it, but I'm going to buy it. No. So why are we having all these conversations like on social media and online about like here's what I want to charge for pricing or charge my worth and all this stuff where it's like cut the crap. Let's look at what are we bringing people in terms of value? How do we make their lives better?
Yeah.
And I'm watching some major shifts in different businesses, life coaching. I'm watching, people with that rise and fall. Like it, it was crazy how much people were charging. And then all of a sudden the industry is noticing like, ooh, I didn't get very much from that. I'm not willing to pay it anymore. In my own industry, I'm watching bookkeepers, the tools, the software and AI has gotten so great and the bookkeepers are not willing. They're looking at how much money do I make? What's my own financial security instead of looking at like how much value do I provide a client? Because now those tools allow them to do it faster or quicker and less expensive. And if they're not shifting with that industry and looking at the value they provide a client, clients are going somewhere else because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's part of the whole like I have to shift. I don't care that you've been doing it this way for the past, 15 years. You got to shift with whatever the market is. Prime example that nobody seems to draw parallel to like AI now is you've got all these really successful businesses that have never needed a website before COVID, and then they went bankrupt, or they never needed to do digital marketing and now they're struggling. Nobody's sending them a lead anywhere, right? Because, but I know that seems like such a well, yeah, they should have seen it coming, but they wouldn't have because they've been looking at the numbers and they were saying, don't fix it if it's not broken, right? Like that mentality instead of going, hey, I'm in my little bubble and I'm still doing good, but what's everybody else doing like around me? Like what's the tech world looking like? What are the trends? What are people's needs? What kind of value? So it's that same idea. Like I know people scoff when I say, well, yeah, no, I have a website. I was like, that's not the point. Is you have to draw the parallels of between what you're doing now and what people are preparing to do in like 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, right? Like you always have to kind of look around to see what's changing. Am I changing with it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting because I don't necessarily think that you have to be the first to adopt something because
No,
early adoption can be pricey, right? But
right.
if you're the last in your industry, I'm thinking a lot of like gift shops and floral studios that were local, and for a long time they just really didn't invest in websites or
Mhm.
having something really sellable online. And they failed drastically as soon as they couldn't sell in person anymore. But it was like I was watching, I'm like, all these online retail businesses are popping up. And so you had to pick your head up out of your own business long enough to look around and be like, oh yeah, what is going on around me? Like,
Right.
what do I see happening? But that's, I think, and maybe the next piece behind that is, scaling a business is hard. You got a million things on your plate. You got every role under the sun. You got to learn all this stuff that you're like, oh, I thought I was just a massage therapist and I got to do all this other stuff. But now you're also being forced to take time out of the business and out of those thousand things you have on your plate to take your head up. And that's a skill set in its own that has to be built. That 50,000 foot view of, what else is going on around me? What are some risks? What are some areas of opportunity, and being able to look at that, where I talk lots to business owners about this of almost being your own board of directors. So if you think of a Fortune 500 company, I'm like, what can we learn from them, right? There's a few things, but one that stands out is they have this board of directors that's not in the business every day, that's giving direction to the CEO of saying like, hey, have you thought of this? Or, they're sort of removed from the business. So I'm a huge fan of putting on that hat, and it might not be daily. It might be once a quarter, maybe once a month, but putting on that hat, even above the CEO, those are really those like strategic level thinkers. That you have to build that skill set up in.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, scaling's hard, right? You get there further, but you can do some things to make it easier. Like have, a board of directors, or have a list of people who strategically help you pull yourself out of the day-to-day. And you can have that group and just say like, hey, I'd love for you to, give me some insight. What are you seeing from the outside in? From people that you think could help the business, strategic areas like marketing, finance. Like think of the C-suite executives that you would see in a Fortune 500, and they make it easier for you to do that.
Right. So I've got a ton of questions and comments.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stop for a minute and just do a quick intro. So for anybody that's just tuning in, you are listening to Negotiating Happiness, and we are live on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 and 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans. And some of our shows are also on Roku TV if you wanted to watch us on TV. Now, I am here with Staci Millard from Thrive Accounting, and she is teaching us all about profitability and how that means sustainability. We talk about money, we talk about failure, we talk about all of the things that people don't usually like to talk about so that we can learn from them. Now, Staci had just talked about, having, board of directors or a system of support that is able to take you out of the day-to-day in order for you to think of the bigger picture when you're scaling, because scaling is hard. So how does it become sustainable over time? You eventually have to scale, and you have to step away a little bit from your business to be able to focus on the health of your business rather than the day-to-day. So I agree with that. I agree that maybe not all of us are looking to have that kind of scale of a business, right? Like I never really envisioned Ontario System to be kind of like a Fortune 500 company, but what I envisioned that it would be is that it would be a name that people would know when they need help for their business, and that they would turn to us with ease, knowing that we've been around for a while and that they trust us. So that to me is more like what my values are from now until, so in order for me to get to the point that you're talking to, maybe over and over again as you're scaling, I love networking and I love collaborating with people and I love talking to people. So my support network are people that are also in the industry. So that kind of brings me to your whole, part about, networking. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the networking that you've got going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that community is so important. I know we've talked a little bit about social and, how we market our business, but the network that we have, hands down, I've watched most of the businesses that I've seen have success. It's because they've had connections. For a retail business, it might be somebody who is like, oh yeah, I've got this connection in this store that you want to be shown in, or this licensing agreement. And it's not necessarily just direct, like, oh, I've got your customers, but it's opportunities in other areas. So, I mean, I'm a part of a ton of different groups that I think fit my need for connection. I might have referrals for them, and I think those are important. I'm happy to, provide a list of all the different groups, but I personally also provide some free networking on the first Friday of every month. We call it the Small Business Club. We have an amazing Canadian online business summit, or Canadian summit, happening in October. It's online, but it's for everybody from brick and mortar to, larger scale businesses, because I want people to connect. Like, I was in a room a little over a year ago, and we were talking about one of my businesses, and I was like, oh, I've got it. Like, now I just need to go implement. We were masterminding, and I'm like, yeah, I've got it all. I just need to do that. And somebody pushed me. They're like, no, like if you needed a connection, who would that next level be? And kind of pushed me. And I said somebody specific that I thought could gain a lot of visibility for the business and be a great partnership. And
Yeah.
one of the people at the table was like, oh yeah, she was my babysitter. Like, I'll introduce you to her. I was like, man, the power of asking and feeling comfortable to ask, right? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this person has millions of followers on Instagram and she was your babysitter. Like, okay. For me, it was like, I wanted to partner with her because of the lifestyle and what, like, her values, but I was just like, this is unreal. So the power of asking is so important, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
how does that fit into your business? Like, I think it goes back to understanding, like, what are all the roles that you play? How does networking fit in? It can't be the only thing you do, because at the end of the day, if all you did was networking, who's doing the work that brings in the money, right?
Yeah.
But I think if I had to pick between doing social media and networking, I would pick networking.
I 100% agree. I love it. I think getting to know people is wonderful. Even if you're not a people person, I think you have to see the value in it if you have a business, or even if you're a little bit shy. Like we ran a retreat last year, and we had a mix of entrepreneurs, and we were kind of worried of like, how's everybody going to mesh together? It was fabulous. Like, we had people that would describe themselves as introverts. We had extroverts. I'm an extrovert, right? And everybody was willingly participating and willingly sharing. And it is wild how many, you get a small group of people together, and that group knows thousands of people, right? So it is crazy that this person that you wanted to collab with was somebody's babysitter, but at the same time, I get it. It's you have to, if you're in these same circles, or if you have some life experience, you're bound to meet people everywhere. So it is really important to ask. And at first, when I started attending these networking groups, I was always like, what do I ask for? I mean, obviously everybody wants more clients, but that was never the point of it. The point of it was, think of what the very next step that you need is, and that's what you ask for. Like, obviously everybody wants more clients, but you're not asking for them to, like, you might say, I have this ideal client, but you're asking for a connection that could bring you there, or you're asking for a connection that could actually, build the next part of your journey. You just never know, right? You never know what that might bring.
Yeah, and I've been in groups where you go in and then they instantly, it's like, okay, well, I'm looking for this client. And I've also been in groups where, the odd person happens to say like, okay, I'm looking for a client, like, who's got a referral? And I don't know about you, but for me, business feels ick doing it that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know how you do business. I don't know your values. Like, my reputation means a lot to me. I put a lot into maintaining it. And so I don't want to put my name on the like hook for a stranger. So what if you went into a room and you're like, look, I'm looking to meet new people. Can I do something for you for free? Just so that if you run across somebody that, might need me, you know how I do things and what to expect. And then you're willing to vouch for me. Like, people aren't willing. They're just instantly, not people. Some people are short-sighted in how they approach it. And if that's what the room is full of, I'd argue, like, go find another room. There's millions of rooms that you could be in. It doesn't have to be just like a very monetary exchange. It can be about relationships, and those are the ones that pay off, right? It's not just one referral. Now it's like 10 over time or something like that. Or it's just more people.
That's what I mean. It could bring you to the next, part of your journey. It doesn't necessarily have to mean, an invoice in your CRM right away. Because if that's how you're doing it, I think you're running more on the scarcity mindset of like, I just need another invoice. No, what you need is another connection that will help you build something better that people will just organically come to because it's better, right? Or because it's helpful, or because it's you have to elevate your brand somehow, right? And there's multiple ways of doing it. And if you're not thinking about your brand or your reputation or the quality of work that you put out, then I would argue that no matter how profitable you are right now, that's not going to be sustainable.
I think that that scarcity mindset also has clues that you really need to look into. So if like any of this is resonating for you, it's like there's a couple things that I see commonly of people like burning the bridge and quitting their job very quickly. And like, I'm going all in this. And what I would say is like, business is a new skill set. So you actually don't know what it's going to take. You don't know necessarily how quickly you could build it. And if you haven't put that legwork into like, do I have the network, and ask yourself those questions, then very quickly we hit scarcity because it takes time. It takes time for those seeds to, grow and flower and bloom instead of just like putting them in. So I see that often, that scarcity mindset come up when somebody's jumped into business, not knowing what to expect. And I also see it when they've not invested in the right way. They've been focused on making money instead of growing a business. Right?
Yes.
They're not investing. They're just like hands down, like, how do I make today's paycheck? And again, like it's got clues. So if you're hitting scarcity mindset is like, well, how did I get here? So if you don't want to repeat the habit, we need to understand that so you don't do it again.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And I'm just posting now in the comments your First Fridays link. So if anybody wants to network with Staci, and if you're an entrepreneur, it's First Fridays are free hour-long monthly online business boost. So here's the link, everybody. Feel free. I just signed up. I forgot to do it earlier.
I love it. Oh, we'll be so happy to have you. Oh yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah,
it's like
so
it's
fun.
No strings attached, just masterminding, networking. Like what do you need? How do we get further? And people are always blown away with like, oh, I had no idea that I could just make business friends like this. But I think
the best part. That's the best part. That's the best part. At first, when we were coming out of the COVID, or still a little bit in it, Instagram was my only outlet for that, and it was allowing me to see some visual representations of who these entrepreneurs were. So that was great. So I actually end up, making some biz besties. We've met in person. We've collaborated on some things, and I have to say, like, those are some of the best connections that I've made to date, right? So things like this, where you're also willing to put out more than what maybe you're receiving, it just goes to show that you're in it for the long run, right? Like, this is truly more sustainable.
Well, I mean, we run an accounting firm. We have zero reason that we need to be hosting an online networking, zero reason we need to be hosting a free summit. But I know that if we can help people be sustainable and profitable and love their businesses, like, everybody kind of thrives. And it's more that community mentality.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. So tell us a little bit about the summit.
So it's going to run the week of Small Business Week here in Canada. It's October 21st to 25th. We have 35 unique speakers, each kind of sharing something about business that gets you further faster. It could be legal, insurance, so some of those traditional things. Of course, we're going to be talking about sales and networking. Some of it's also about how you show up in business, your mindset, leadership, how you juggle life and business, accounting, obviously. And it's really just meant to help people thrive. It's 100% free. There is a paid version that if you want all of the replays and things like that, but a really great opportunity to connect with some of the best service providers when it comes to business. And we haven't officially launched registration for that yet, but we will be launching it really soon. I'm so excited for it because I said I've been running events since 2015, but the downside to a personal or an in-person event, like, I love meeting people face to face. I'm an introvert. I find it a lot easier kind of connecting with people. But when you're like, I live very remotely and it's not always easy to get away to those types of things. So we wanted to make it really accessible for everybody to access.
Yeah, which is great. I'm really excited for it. I guess if anybody wants to get a head start, just go ahead and go on the First Fridays link, and I'm sure the members will be alerted when registration is on. It's really great that it's also a free resource where you can potentially meet a lot of people that are, kind of in the same boat as you, or maybe they're more ahead and you have lots to learn from. So that's awesome. I'm excited to see what comes with that. So funny enough, we're 10 minutes out and we've already, I can't believe the hour's almost gone. I usually leave the personal questions till about the end, more in the sense of, you, Staci, as an individual, not as, all the other roles you have in your life. What makes this worth it to you? Like, what do you do that kind of fills your cup? Like, I know you want to help people and businesses, but I want to know about you, like what do you do? For me, it's travel, right? So where are you at with that?
Yeah, you're probably going to ask me to leave all that behind, but it's so funny. My sister finally was like, "Oh, you're human design," like maybe like astrology or something. It was just like this is your nature. I couldn't
Yeah.
describe it before, but it was just something I was born with, is like that sense of contribution. So after exiting my first business, I did take a number of months off where I wasn't sure I was ever going to start a business again or what that would look like. And I will tell you, like, I actually ended up depressed from a lack of contribution. And if you know me, like, it's not always paid. I'm very generous with my time. But that lack of contribution left me in a pretty dark place. So for me, it's just about how I can show up for the community, leaving the world a better place. Everything we do, as a family, everything I do as an individual is about that. Whether it's like my health and my eating habits are like, okay, how do I show up as a strong person so I can make a contribution? Of course, like, I enjoy other things too. Like, I enjoy a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning when it's sunny out and the birds are chirping, and enjoy downtime for sure. But my biggest driver is contribution.
That's good. So that's basically what brings you your happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's a good, I think
But
that's a good trade-off, right?
I love that you love travel. So one of the things I learned about myself earlier this year is, like, I'm on the spectrum for autism. The idea of traveling is like, I don't do well with that. Like, I'm now like scheduled for my like third trip to New York, and the first two never happened, and I was like not sad about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this new place and the idea of all the people. I'm like, one of our mutual friends, I'm like having to be like, look, like, maybe I'll just fly to you and then we'll fly there together. So I just don't have to show up alone. So I
Yeah.
love that you love travel. I always have that, like, oh, it'd be so cool to just like be totally in love with the new experiences of places and like getting to enjoy that. I guess I just at some point had to admit, like, that's not me.
I love that you said you weren't sad about it. I'd be like devastated.
Yeah.
What
No,
do
like,
you mean that's not happening? I'm going anyway. Like,
yeah, no, I
that's
was like, oh,
funny.
good. I'll cancel that flight.
That's so funny. I love that. I love that I get to know a little bit of you through these questions. And it always surprises me when people say, like, I had one guest that said that waking up at 5 a.m. and just working out before the world is awake is like the best thing for her. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds terrible.
That does sound awful. That does.
Right? But that's what brings her that boost of like everything, endorphins, happiness. She gets to be in the quiet. I get it. It's nobody's awake, nobody's bothering her. It's like her time, right? But for me, I'm like, get all sweaty and everything at 5 in the no, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all have different, drives. For me, knowing that I have like a trip coming up, or even if it is work related, I'm okay with it. And I'm just like, yes, this is the only time I will never complain about having to go somewhere at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I'll be at the airport. I will be tired, but I will be there and I will be happy, right? Like, it's just my let's go phase. Don't get me wrong, travel is uncomfortable sometimes, and I have done it the very like student-y kind of way. And I've done it the opposite too. I think you just have to find happiness in whatever it is that you do. I don't say I would prefer one over the other, as I get older, I just find that these experiences are worth more and more to me. Just like you said, you feel like you need a purpose at all times. And for me, I feel like when I travel, I just learn so much that's my purpose for that moment, right? Like I'm enjoying the moment, but I'm learning. So it's
I love
different.
that. And I think it's so interesting because I find so much joy out of like those smaller moments. I read this quote about how like life happens in the moments in between.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really love is not feeling like we're rushed. And oh my gosh, I did a reel about this a while ago, and I just felt like it really hit for people. Is like we literally schedule our lives the same way we drive cars, which is like if the speed limit's 100, you're going 110. Like, and if you're not, or I don't know, you're in Toronto, so it's like probably 140. And if you're not, people are mad at you and they're yelling at you, and like that's how we live our lives. But
Yeah.
for me, it's like, how do we get to like, I have two daughters, they're 6 and 8, but I love being able to like teach them a lesson, like unpack, like, why did I say that? Or they notice something, and just being able to have like a little bit of time to like, oh yeah, like, oh, I wonder how that person was feeling. And those moments in between are just like so magical. And
Yeah.
thankfully, I just don't feel like I got to travel to experience them. But however you get those moments is
Yeah.
like inserting those in your lives is like, that's what makes life, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And, for me, very similar to what you're saying about you and your daughters, seeing my son experience things for the first time is like whoa, pause. Like, we haven't seen this before. Look at the wonder on his face. And I just sit there and I watch him and I'm like, oh my God. Like, and to me, it's so like overplayed in my head, but to him, it's like this brand new thing. And it makes me kind of be like, okay, I got to slow down. I got to enjoy some of these. And I have to show him that he doesn't have to rush through these moments that he's enjoying, that he can take that time and he can learn. And like, he was showing me something like an ant. Like, it's so cliche to think about it, but to him, a 4-year-old, he's like, look at what that ant's doing. And I'm like, all right, we'll take some time and we're looking at what the ant's doing. And I just remembered that. Or when we were away, I actually took him with me. So that was a little bit crazy, but we worked it out. We were in the mountains, and the mountains are beautiful, and the mountains are just something that I always want to be in nature. We stayed at a place that, there was like 6 steps down to a river. And all I wanted to do is stick my feet in that river and just sit there in the sun and do nothing. And I thought about it, how I can't do that here because I'm going at 140 an hour, because somebody's like, even during the show right now, I already got 2 phone calls during the show.
Mm-hmm.
So like that never ever stops for me. So I think travel is where it's like kind of like my excuse of my phone's off. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to enjoy it and breathe through it. And you know what I mean? But
so maybe what I would say is like, I found a lot of power in scaling a business. I'm not talking about Fortune 500 because I've never had an ambition to do that, but scaling a business so it's not just all on you. Like, do you have a team? Are they capable when you want to step away, right?
Yeah.
I just think there's so much value in that. And that's kind of one of the reasons that led me to scaling businesses is like, I just don't want to be the person responsible for everything. I want to be a part of a team.
Yes. So I'm somewhere in between that, where I had so much help from my assistant. Shout out to Rachel. She did a great job, and I was able to step away for 3 weeks. And to me, I'm like, this is why I'm doing it, because I can leave for 3 weeks and things aren't burning down to the ground, right? So that's exactly it. It's the flexibility, right? Like, this is why I went into it. Like, I have a small kid. I'd like to do more of this stuff. So for me, those moments come for when I get to remove myself and him and just go places and try new food. But yeah, the travel doesn't make me as anxious as it makes some people, and I recognize that. And I've traveled with people before, and I can say that I'm probably a lot more like, oh yeah, this happens, it's fine. And whereas other people are like, what do we do? Nothing. You just live. You continue to live.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time. I'm sure we could probably put like 10 more of these together if we wanted to. So come back soon.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I really appreciate you having me on, but also I appreciate what you do for businesses and how you help take some of that burden away as they scale. So love to support you with that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And again, I love your outlook on, you got to put in more in order to receive on the back end. That actually helps you build rather than just receive right away, which is a really important skill. I think that people tend to learn later in their journeys, but obviously you're so experienced with it and it just comes out very organically, which I love. Thank you so much for coming in here. Thank you everybody that joined us as well. We will be live again next week, and huge shout out to the network, the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network for giving us this platform to be able to spread our messages and to help entrepreneurs everywhere, or people thinking about becoming entrepreneurs. So just a reminder, you guys can send in your questions and comments and we will feature them and answer them to the best of our abilities every week. Thank you so much, Staci, for coming. And we will see you guys next week.
Amazing. Thank you.